Hello, everyone. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Rena Sherbill, host of the Cannabis Investing podcast and senior editor for Seeking Alpha. Rena Sherbill, how is my favorite person in Israel doing?
Oh, that is some high praise. I know how many people you know here, Kevin. That is exciting. Thank you for that. I am doing, I am doing well. How are you? As I said, my new married friend.
Yes, thank you very much. Yep, I'm a married man, and it feels great. I cannot complain. There's been a lot of craziness happen this year. Obviously, we've talked about it before, but there's been a lot of good highlights in my personal life. So um, can't complain.
There you go. Got to see those silver linings. Sounds like you've got a few big ones. So yeah, it's funny. I feel like this. I was just thinking about this also. Last week not to bring it down, but last week our COO passed away at Seeking Alpha, and it was like very heartbreaking for the company. It was very shocking. It was very traumatic. I wrote about it, but I was thinking. So the past few days have obviously been like really hard, very emotional, and I've been talking to some of my friends at work, and we've been talking about how this is such like a low. It's so awful. I mean, it's one of those things that really like shakes you to your existential core. But in thinking about that, you also think about even like the good to come out of that, which is like all these really positive stories and all these people kind of trying to do better. And in thinking about that, I was thinking about how this year has really had some profound lows and some profound highs. And it's like, it's such a weird thing to be able to like stay in that presence of. But yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, well, first off, I'm really sorry to hear that. And, my heart and thoughts and prayers go out to the Seeking Alpha community and all the employees and of course, the CEO and his family. But yeah, I mean, that's tough. But to your point, I mean, that's so true. It's almost like challenges and overcoming adversity is a good thing because it just kind of showcases how amazing human beings can be as we adjust and navigate through these different challenges, right? And so we've seen that in the cannabis industry, we've seen that in other industries, and it's like you said, it's the silver lining, it's those pandemic pros, as I've said before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great metaphor because like the cannabis industry is really like well suited to that metaphor because yeah, I mean, look, COVID starts like this terrible thing that is continuously like showing the after effects of not just the pandemic, but everything in its wake. But then like look what happens to the cannabis sector. I mean, it's crazy. It's totally crazy. And then like this election, like could more people have had a harder time in the past like week, like stress eating, stress smoking, no sleep? I mean, what? Pick your thing that people were like suffering from. And then it's like every single cannabis measure passes. It's like literally the only thing that Americans are agreeing on is cannabis.
Right. And I've said it before, no matter who the president is, and obviously some of these bills have kind of been politicized and baked into other things, but it's a bipartisan issue ultimately. I think that with overwhelming public support, like we saw with those 5 states passing, which was just huge, it's people want this to happen, and it's just a matter of time now. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do not think this happens without COVID and all of the after effects. I don't think all those measures pass like they did.
Yeah. And with COVID, you're so right. It's like, people, and even the height of the election, the stress. I mean, even right now, I still have kind of an uneasy feeling just not knowing, right? But I feel like that feeling is going to persist until inauguration because, unless there's really no evidence and whatnot with the Trump administration are going to bring forward, this could drag out for a little bit. Uh,
What are your thoughts? Because I'm across some oceans. What are your thoughts on like the likelihood of that happening? Like it being drawn out to that degree?
I don't think, I mean, it's definitely going to be drawn out in terms of it's going to go to court. I think today they're going to make their like public statements about what evidence they're bringing forward and whatnot. So that'll kind of be a factor to see if there's anything there. But the fact that there's so much evidence that he'd need to present, and this isn't just one specific state. These are like 5 different battleground states, right? So you're going to need to really showcase evidence, and that amount of evidence in each state to really have a case. So I think it's highly unlikely that it'll be overturned. I think that Biden will be the presidential elect, but I don't think that it'll happen right away. I mean, this is going to be we know how Trump is, right? It's going to be drawn out for a little bit.
It's interesting because if I may make another comparison to the cannabis industry, it's like all these ballot measures that just passed, and everybody's like, so bullish on the cannabis sector, and oh my gosh, and New Jersey is legal, let's go. But it's like these things are going to take a long time. Like you're not going to be going into a dispensary in New Jersey with your adult use, any time, soon. I think at best it's in some quarter in 2021, and that honestly is like best case scenario, everybody agreeing on all the different parameters of the bill and stuff.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah,
You're so right, Rena. You're absolutely right, and that's such a good point to make, because we need to kind of manage expectations here, right? It's a good thing and whatnot, but don't expect things to happen overnight. It's right, and a lot of these states have to implement plans where they can regulate, and you know what I mean. And if that's not in place, that's what they're building from the ground up right now. You know.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure you would agree with this that I feel like until I really started my cannabis podcast, like I was a fan of the cannabis industry. I was a follower of the cannabis industry. I follow things, but like I did not understand the kind of all the work that goes into all those headlines that you read. And every time a headline would come across my screen, like a state passes cannabis or federally, like, or even like the thought of a law being brought to the floor, I was like, oh my God, oh, it's happening. But like, it's such a process. It's so like involved, and there's so many things to get out from under, and there's so many different like moving parts to have to look at. So yeah, it's a much longer and circuitous route to legalization, but nevertheless, still great news. We still have to get there somehow.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely worth celebrating, and I'm glad you brought that up again, because with the whole kind of process and the timing, because I'm having Louis Lujan. He's a governmental lobbyist at the state, local, and federal level. I've had him on before, but he's in Arizona, and he's been really working and lobbying on the bill that passed. So Friday, record with him, and we'll talk through kind of what all that looks like and what that process entails, because he's going to know it firsthand. So
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, all the like people that have to work on it, and all their opposing, interests and all, yeah.
exactly, yeah, making it work at this point. So, but we did promise each other we were going to have some champagne to celebrate if it happens. So hopefully he's got his glass of champagne ready.
That's awesome. That's an interesting choice of celebratory a method on a cannabis podcast.
Hey, I live in Texas. I mean, smokable CBD is doesn't really
Yeah,
do it for me. I like edibles of CBD and salves, but yeah, not the
I
smoke.
got you. I got you.
Yeah.
Champagne works. He must be stoked. I mean, God, how exciting is that to like be working on this and then have it pass? It's amazing.
It's amazing. Exactly. Yeah. And it's so great for the Southwest region of the US, because all those neighboring states, are going to start to see, well, why aren't we doing this and benefiting off the tax revenue that the cannabis is bringing in. And so states like New Mexico, where I grew up, which is medical, I think that I've heard whispers of eventually they want to become recreational in the next couple of years. I've heard rumblings in Texas about medical. So I think the ball is really rolling.
I think so too. And I think like as you said, like Arizona is like a gateway for that area of the country. I think New Jersey is also going to pressure like New York and Pennsylvania. And like I think it's a domino effect. You can't, especially now, like where people are starved for capital, once you see the money coming in, I just think it's like, how can you say no to that?
Yeah.
And I would like to add also like how totally happy I am about what Oregon did in terms of decriminalizing like hard drugs, and not only decriminalizing, but then using, like, if somebody gets stopped for having those drugs on them, like under a certain amount, I think, they'll get a fine, and then they have the option to go to like a treatment center. I mean, we're not just talking for cannabis, we're talking like heroin and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah. They could.
I
Yeah, they said, "Fuck it, let's do it. Let's open the gates and allow everything." Which is, I don't know. I mean, I want to talk to you about that. But go ahead. Sorry to cut you off. Continue.
No, yeah, I was just saying like how awesome it is, and they're using those funds to like build those programs from legal cannabis sales. I mean, that is like the world that I want to be living in. It's like so awesome.
Yeah. Well, so here's my question, right? And I'm not. I think it's great, but I want to kind of explore why it's great and maybe why there could be some negative consequences, right? So we know that cannabis has been put in the Schedule 1, the Controlled Substances Act, which we all know, or anybody who's had experience with cannabis, it's not like heroin, it's not like
Yeah.
cocaine, right? It's not physically addicting, you can't overdose from it, right? So there's a whole, we can take that out of that category if we're talking about its effects and kind of its medicinal properties, right? So now we focus on heroin and cocaine, and so to me, I understand that if someone is dabbling with cocaine and they're caught by the cops, that you're going to jail for a long time, right? Which is kind of the same situation that we've had with cannabis and these initiatives that have been built, like the Last Prisoner Project, where we want to undo those wrongs, right? So I could see it from a decriminalization standpoint, but they're just decriminalizing, right? Are they actually going to sell these products also in the state?
No, no, no. I mean, I didn't see anything about that. I don't want to say for sure because I didn't see anything, but no, I can't imagine that that's what they're doing. No, I don't think so.
So it's a bill to just decriminalize so that these people who are caught up in it don't go to jail forever, right? On some type of like.
Don't go to jail. They get fined, and then they can go to a treatment center. Which, like, look, for me, I mean, I hear why you're hesitant, and I know that people have come out, especially like people that have been addicted and been through treatment for heroin or cocaine or harder drugs like that. That say like, well, what about the youth? Like now they think they can walk around with heroin, but like, I don't think it really works like that. Like, I don't think people are now going to be encouraged to try heroin that weren't otherwise going to try it. Like, I think this is for people that are taking hard drugs. And I feel like, I don't know if you agree with this, but I strongly feel like jail is not the place for a drug addict. Jail is a place for hardened criminals.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm blanking on what country it was, but there's a country, a Spanish speaking country. It's not Uruguay. We can Google it. That played with this idea of decriminalizing hard drugs and instead opening up treatment centers, and just like the crimes that are associated with procuring those drugs like went way down.
Mhm.
It just like it affects, and I think it also affects the person taking it,
Yeah.
because they don't look at themselves as a criminal. They look at themselves as somebody that has a habit that isn't working for them or that is leading them down a path that they don't want to be down. But I think once you're talking about treatment centers versus jail, I think it changes the whole notion of what that is. And to me, it's a lot more holistic in its treatment and in its aim of intent. So I think to me that makes it just is more humane to me.
I know 100% agree. Yeah, you don't want to stack these people up in prison for these petty offenses when we could actually help them out and put our tax dollars to work in programs that get them out of that addiction cycle, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm totally with you there, and even with psilocybin being legal, that may be a treatment remedy, right? I mean, I've heard about ayahuasca and other uh, hallucinogens. What is it? Toboga is another one,
So
and
you're
it
gonna know better than me.
and it helps with those type of addictive problems. But another question, it would be like, do you think now that it is decriminalized that there may be more of an influx of these drugs on the street?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I have like the knowledge of like how, drugs like heroin and cocaine are like brought into the system, that if like the penalties are lessened, does that mean there's more product being moved around? I don't know. Maybe. I think that in general, to me, it seems like, look, it's a hard thing to know because, the heroin and cocaine are likely to be forever on the illicit side of things. I don't see them being like legalized as like, here's a dispensary for heroin. So like however those drugs are coming into the market, they're always through nefarious means. It's
Right.
always with nefarious players doing nefarious things on the side. So I don't know, in terms of like what that means. I can't speak to the numbers. I also don't know enough about how drugs are brought into, society to make that call.
Yeah.
But I will say, I do feel like unless data proves me wrong over the next couple of years, that like, oh my gosh, we're seeing a crazy influx of heroin and cocaine. As far as I know, my experience is of knowing people that have been through treatment centers because of heroin, and knowing people that have a bad relationship with cocaine. It doesn't seem that it's ever hard to get. It doesn't seem that there's like, oh, somebody wants those things and they can't get them. So like, will there be more? I don't know, and I don't mean to be callous, but like, I'm not sure that like a few more percentage points of this drug coming into the system like outweighs the benefits of like what that law does.
Mm.
But again, I'm not a policy expert. It's just like my own personal feelings based on empirical research. But yeah,
No, that's what it's all about. No one has the right answer. It's just it's
yeah.
yeah.
Nobody has the right answers, man.
We don't know until we know. Is
We're
really
all just talking. We're all just talking.
yeah.
We're
It's
all just
great.
speculating.
So hey, weren't you on vacation? You were like in the office for a while? Where'd you go?
I was. I went to go visit my daughter, and I went to go visit family in California, and we had a great time.
Nice. You're back in the States. Very nice.
Yeah, we're back in the States. We met a niece we haven't met, got to spend some good time with my brother and my mom. And yeah, it was really fun times. I will say it was also like a way to escape. There was like a severe lockdown in Israel that we also really wanted to escape. And it was nice to be able to leave during that time, even though I'm sure another one's coming our way in a few weeks.
Man, yeah, no, you dodged a bullet there. And well, I heard the UK, they're shutting down again, right? And France, is
Yeah,
that
a lot of parts of the Europe. Yeah, a lot of parts of Europe. I had a bunch of friends that just got back from Spain and France and the UK, and they all left like wanting to get out of there before those lockdowns. Yeah, it might be the like next 6 months to a year. It might be like every couple of months. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, but
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we're in for one also, if that's the trend in Europe. Has China been closed at all? Have they
I don't, they were doing things selectively and they seemed to like really get a handle. It seemed to me, and again, I might have this like slightly wrong, but it seemed like China closed itself, like it was more insular, which actually I thought Israel was going to do because it's like, well, Israel's a small country. I thought it would close Israel, let us like work out the germs between us, and then kind of let us move freely in the country, which is not what happened at all. Um, but I think that's kind of what China did is they really like honed in into like localities and provinces and tried to like eradicate it that way, and that's why I think the numbers are so down.
got
Um,
like they use data and they hit the problem right like head on.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but also to say nothing of numbers manipulation, which I know we are doing in Israel. I know everybody does, so I also don't know how much that affects. Yeah,
Yeah, everyone's doing it. We don't really know the numbers. It's all over the place. And then things change and whatnot. So
totally, totally, totally.
yeah. So hey, what has been the response, like say from Israel and other countries, with the cannabis states passing and whatnot, and so much momentum in the U.S. from the election?
I think it's really exciting. I think it's like all those metaphors are apt. The train has left the station, the cat's out of the bag. Like, I think people have known it for quite some time. And the more states that go legal, I think the more that's evidence. But like, even like Kronos, for instance, is like really building out their business in Israel, and they're like highlighting wanting to get into or they're in the Israel market and they're like building that out right now. So like I think that's also a trend. I mean, there are already a bunch of companies that have their R&D in Israel or have various partnerships with Israeli companies, but I think it's only a mutually beneficial kind of like road that I think if the more legal America goes. I also think that it really affects Israel. First of all, there's like a really close relationship for the most part between America and Israel. And there's a lot of like, Western influences because Israel is like has so many immigrants. I think we're really influenced by that, even if we're not really there yet. But like I will say like there's a huge cannabis. Cannabis is medical only right now in Israel, and it's been decriminalized for the most part. You get like a fine if you're caught with something like under I think 15 grams. But there's and every there are medical dispensaries that are here, and you see them, but the windows are never open. You wouldn't know it's a dispensary unless you somehow knew. It's very like, on the down low.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But then like right before I went to the States like a couple months ago in like northern Tel Aviv on a pretty busy street, it's like a huge glass like the windows are all street facing. You see all the cannabis, you see all the brands. I was like, what? Am I in California? Like it was so surprising. So I was like, it looked like a California dispensary. It was modeled like one, and it's medical only, but like you see the people coming in and out, you see the people standing in line. Like I was like, that's wild. I mean, that's a huge step. Like I feel like we're right there. It's just, I mean, it might have a lot to do with COVID at this point because like nothing is getting done right now, and
Mhm.
everything seems to be like, we're not passing any new bills that have anything to do other than lockdowns and COVID related stuff. But I think we're right there. I think we're
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, obviously, we're talking today, today's the November 9th, Monday. But so this will air probably, later in the week, but cannabis stocks have been rallying. I mean, since the election, right? I mean, I'm looking right now at my portfolio and just checking other stocks out, and they're just continuing to rise.
Dude, stocks are on fire this morning. I like looked at my portfolio a couple of minutes or like an hour ago, and I was like, I had to tweet out a picture of my portfolio. Like, it's crazy.
I did
I
the
mean,
same thing. I tweeted the same thing. It's just that big spike that goes
yeah,
straight up. It's insane. Yeah.
it's like a rocket ship. Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, it's been really nice to like wake up and see those numbers. I feel like also, especially like all the volatility that we were experiencing in the summer and like feeling like, I mean, I think there's still volatility, right? I mean, I think like people are super excited about the election, about all these pro cannabis initiatives that have passed, about Biden and Harris winning the election, and they're on the record as being pro legalization. So I think there's a lot of reason for excitement. And I think more than kind of the sentiment, right? Sentiment alone is always going to be volatile because people are fickle creatures. But I do think that what stands the test of time, like right now from here on out, is that the companies are getting a lot more serious in terms of how they're running their operations. So I think even if the sentiment is somewhat fickle, I think the fundamentals of like the top players, I think are really like, some of those companies are really like fun to look at. And also, I think it's fun to look at the states that have passed these measures, like who's likely to capitalize on that. Like I think in Arizona, there's a company called Harvest Health and Recreation. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they've been having like a tough time lately. Like I would say in the past year plus, they've had a lot of deals fall through. I've talked about it. I might have talked about it on your show. I've talked about it on my show, just in the sense of like there's a lot to like about that company because they make smart acquisitions, but they definitely expanded way too fast. They definitely took on too many acquisitions. Some of them went to lawsuits, like they didn't end well. But they have like 50%, stake, sorry, in Arizona. So I feel like that's a company that you can look at and like they have a ton of debt, so you wonder if they're going to be okay even with all that bullishness in Arizona. But I do feel like there's things to look at in terms of like the states and following that, like Curaleaf in New Jersey or Terra Send, which has been a company that I'm freshly looking at for the past like month or two. There's a lot to like in that company too, for a lot of the same reasons why I like all the companies, which is sound fundamentals, good management, not overly aggressive, honing in on something that makes sense for them and doing it well, and having a strategy that's paying off. So yeah, it's like fun to look at all the states that are passing that will likely be selling cannabis in the next year, and the companies that are doing well in those states, like go look at those companies and you can like really capitalize on some great stocks that I feel like for some of them it might be worth waiting some time because the prices are like sky high right now. But other ones like even Terra Send, I mean, it's below $10, or Harvest is below $2. Sometimes it's nice to get in on those smaller cap stocks as just a way to see what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah, I have I did took the same mindset. So from our last conversation, I really did look into those MSOs that you were talking about, Harvest Health being one. And I mean, like you said, they're trading so low right now anyway that you don't need to take a lot of risk up front, and you can just kind of see how these things are playing out. And you're absolutely right. Like I would be patient when it comes to buying at this point because they're all up so high, right? The prices are just skyrocketing. So when do you expect that to drop off and these prices to stabilize?
Look, I think with all the excitement of the election and the winners coming through, I think like it's going to take some time before reality sets back in. I think there's also an issue of if you look at like the Canadian LPs, there's an issue of short selling being covered. So like Aurora Cannabis, which is not a stock I would buy, is like soaring right now. You know, it's like this also, but not based on fundamentals, just based on the fact that it just beat expectations in its earnings report, and I think we'll see that. But that's a lot of because the earnings expectations were brought so low. So a lot of these companies are not a lot, but some of these companies that aren't fundamentally sound are going to be beating expectations. So I think that there's going to be some, volatility. I think for different reasons, like for short covering, for the bullishness on the sector. Um, but I think like, look, I don't know. I mean, I ask myself this too. Like, I want to get more shares of a couple of stocks, and I'm waiting to see. And I haven't played it right in all the instances. Um, it's hard to know. I think if you see it going down close to your price target, I would say get in a little bit at a time. And then if it continues to go down, get more. And if it continues to go up, like stay out. I think that's the best strategy.
Yeah, you can't really predict at all. I mean, there's one company that I've been looking at, Akerna. Kern is the ticker.
Yeah, yeah. Because are you looking at them because they're in the MSOS ETF?
Yes, that, and then also, well, not. I mean, that's part of the reason why, but I mean, just the fact that they're an ancillary and ancillary company, but they're focused on the software side and the regulatory and inventory tracking, right? So I haven't really dabbled in the software side just yet, but I'm bringing them up because, man, talk about volatility. Even like with how we see the majority of these cannabis stocks going way up and skyrocketing, this one has been like really up and down even in the past just day and couple of days. So I don't know what's going on there, but I just wanted to call it out. Like some companies they're not all the same, in that way.
No, they're definitely not all the same. And I will say, like, I saw that that's a holding in the ETF, and I've just been looking at the ETF recently because it's exciting. I mean, it's like exciting that there's an actively managed ETF that's focusing on the US players, but I haven't looked into that company very, very deeply. So I can't really say that much about it.
Yeah.
But I would definitely agree with that sentiment. Not all companies are created equally
Right.
or are built equally.
Right. Yeah. And I see that you're one of your favorites. I don't know, want to speak for you, but True Leaf
You
is
know it.
killing it, man. They're
You
just
know it.
continuing to just go up. We need to get Kim Rivers on the podcast at some point. I know that you've had her on, but man, it'd be great to talk with her. I know that you were very impressed with her management style and everything that she's bringing to the table at True Leaf.
Absolutely. I mean, I think they're doing great, and I think that's an example of a company that's sticking to one state, doing it really well, and only then going out to other states, which I think is a model that has worked for Trulieve. It's also worked for Air Strategies in terms of them getting licenses in key states and only then expanding out to other states. And look, I think they're just making really smart choices. Um, with how they're spending their money. I think there was some question about the dilution about a month ago, their decision to kind of dilute shares a little bit. But I would say that I trust their management and trust the strategy and trust what they're doing. I know that there was also some excitement about them getting into West Virginia, which didn't happen. So there's been some setbacks, but I would say by and large, like Trulieve is a stalwart of the industry and definitely like one of the top stocks to be looking at.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, they're just super consistent. They just
Yeah.
continue to
Yeah.
increase and go and rise. Yeah. Well, look, I want to talk to me about TerraSend. You mentioned TerraSend. What do they do? I haven't heard. That's a new one to me.
So it's a Canadian company, but they have operations in New Jersey. So they're well strategized to take advantage of New Jersey going legal. Um, they just have a lot of capital. They don't have much debt. They're very well managed. Again, it's a company I've just started looking into, mostly because of how well capitalized it is, and the investors that have invested in it. I think are people that put their money in smart investments. And that was like why I started looking at TerraSend. It was like Canopy Rivers, which is like the investment arm of Canopy Growth, invests in TerraSend. A couple other money managers I was talking to also have their money in it. So I was intrigued and excited about that, and everything that I've looked into and read so far really backs up that thesis. And then with New Jersey going legal, it was like, oh, here we go. So it's fun to. I was looking at a certain number of stocks, and then over the summer, I wasn't really adding anything to my watch list. And in the past, I would say like 2 to 3 months, I've added a few stocks that are below $5, in most cases below like $4. So they have like good entry points, and I'm wondering like how much room there is to run there. And I would say like TerraSend is above $5, but TerraSend is one of those stocks. Um, I'm just blanking on the other one that I was about to mention. Planet 13 was another one that I'm looking at. And then Harvest Health, I'm also interested. I'm not sure about Harvest Health because I don't like how they did all those acquisitions and their expansion. And I'm also not sure if they're just looking to sell. But it's intriguing. And especially if you're looking to get in and out and trade over investing, it might be a nice thing to do. But in terms of investing, those are kind of the new stocks I'm looking at and seeing like how much they can capitalize on this growth in the US.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I've been doing the same strategy. The entry points, like you said, are just so low. It's like, why not? Even if it's not going to be a long-term investment play, at least in the short term, you may be able to get out and make some money in the short term. And one that I've been looking at, and they're actually on the penny stocks, and they've been doing quite well since the election is and I want to know if you know anything about them, but they trade on the Canadian Stock Exchange, and they're Ianthus Capital Holdings.
Yeah,
Hey,
no, 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 no.
no, no.
Problem, warning,
Okay.
abort mission.
Why? Tell me what's going on.
Well, are you familiar like with their whole background this year of like management and the whole
They had didn't they had some restructuring. They brought new people in or not? Am I wrong about that?
well, I believe they had to bring new people in because of how badly mismanaged the company was. I'm not honestly like I was talking about Ianthus at the beginning of the summer, and now honestly it's fallen off my radar because I stopped liking them. So I'm gonna have to like refresh my memory. But like the fact that it's at 17 cents, like in this case there's a reason. Right, they defaulted on their debt. Thank you. That's what they did.
Got you. Okay. Well, I've made some money because I got in at a really, really low entry. So maybe I should just get out at this point.
Well, look, I mean, that's a thing. Like that's trading and not investing. So like that's not my bailiwick. But I would say long term, if you're asking me about Ianthus, I would say no. I
Long
would
term.
say,
No. Okay. All right. That's good
yeah,
to know. That's
yeah,
good to
yeah,
know. Let me look at who else I got here while I have you on the.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting to think about like the fact that there was so much volatility and there's the prices are right on some of those stocks, but on others, there's a reason why the price is there.
Right. What are your thoughts on Sundial Growers?
I do not know Sundial Growers.
Okay.
Sorry. Sorry.
All right.
What do you think about Sundial Growers?
I mean, from a trading standpoint, they're looking good, but long-term investment, not quite sure. So I'm gonna have to do more research there.
Okay, I'm gonna add it. I'm gonna look into them a little bit. So
T- Okay, Tilray. So what do you think of Tilray?
so Tilray is a great example of this short selling being covered. You know, they're a Canadian company that uh, had a bunch of cash, didn't know, I think, really how to spend it. And I don't. I think that the reason that their price is soaring right now is just because of short covering.
Short
I
cover.
wouldn't say that they're like a fundamentally sound long-term investment. I honestly like in terms of Canada right now there are reasons to be bullish. Like I think people were so bearish on them this past year. I think there are sound reasons to be bullish, right? Like the market's opening up, more storefronts are opening up. The problems with getting the product to customers and patients because of those reasons is not really there anymore. But I think Canada's like a small market. I think in terms of those companies getting into the U.S. market when it does when it is legal and they can get into the U.S. market, I think they might be working from behind, unless you're talking about like, you know, some of them have American tentacles, like, you know, they all have ways of getting in the, you know, like with acreage as a way to get into the U.S. Market. They have ways to get into the U.S. market, but I still think they're focused right now in the Canadian markets, and it's going to be hard to parlay that into profits in the US, I think. And right now, Canada doesn't make enough sense by and large to warrant investing in Canadian companies. But I think, like, even if you are bullish on Canada and want to invest in some of those companies, like, it wouldn't be Tilray. I would say maybe Afria, I would say Canopy Growth, even though the price is pretty high, they probably have room for growth there just because of who they're backed by and kind of all the you know, acreage and all the ways they have to get into the states, and just because they're so well capitalized
Hmm.
because they were bought by Constellation. So yeah, I think in general, Tilray, I would not. I think that the reason it's doing well isn't because of fundamental reasons. Um, and yeah, I guess that's my take on Canada. I'm not like crazy bullish on Canada, but I do think there are actually the Valence company is another company I started looking at in Canada. I think that they might have some room to grow there.
Yeah, I had their CEO on recently in the Valence company, and
Nice.
I was pretty impressed with him and you know what their overall mission was and how they're trying to solidify their footprint in Canada. And so, and Afria, you mentioned Afria. I do own shares there, and they've been really consistent also. So
Have been really consistent, yeah. You know, they just bought that, or they just invested in the beverage. Is it a C? Now I'm blanking if it's a CBD beverage or if it's a THC beverage. But that's also some. Say it again.
I'm not sure. I don't know if which it would be. I can look.
Um, I actually want to no. It's a craft beer actually. I was wrong on both.
Uh,
Um, they invest in craft beer, and I am curious to see how the whole cannabis beverage thing plays out. Like that is something I'm excited and kind of interested in looking at. Like now there's this whole thing with like THC infused seltzer. I think that's like the main way to play the beverage space right now. But people are like really working on it, and I'm intrigued to see like where that goes.
Yeah, me too. You know, I had Austin Stevenson, his episode just aired recently, and his company focuses on infused beverages and kind of really mastering the science behind it. And one thing that he talked about that was really interesting to me was he used the word emulsion and how within some of the one initial problem that he found when they were working with PBR was that the cannabinoids within the can were actually sticking to the sides of the inner can, and so
Mhm.
it wasn't getting all mixed into the beverage. So when they would do tests initially, you know, the beverage would have no trace of CBD at all. So they were like, "What is going on here?" So they had to, you know, basically re-engineer the emulsion process. I'm gonna probably butcher this, but in a way that it mixes better with the liquid instead of sticking to the sides of the can, which is crazy, you know?
Yeah, I've heard that like a lot of the problems with the beverage are like that is like packaging material, you know, like it's leaching into the packaging material, like all these kind of like non can of, you know, like it has nothing to do with like the liquid that's in the thing. It's like the packaging sometimes. And um yeah, there's like so much trial and error. It's like cool to see a new, because I do think that there is like a lot of potential there. I mean, I think it's like an edibles type of situation. Like people are going to love THC drinks. I think if you're talking about like once we get to go out and drink in public again and sit with our friends, and like that's like really exciting to think about the prospect of that. I think there's a real like place in society for that to be like super successful, and I think the company or companies that get that right, I think will have something to show for it. So I'm really excited to kind of like see where that goes, and see who. For the longest time, everybody thought Canopy was going to get it right because they had the most invested and they were doing the best. And some people still think that. It's interesting though, in all the time that has passed, like if somebody's going to come in and kind of like figure that out, and take advantage of that before them.
Yeah. Have you ever consumed like a THC infused beverage or like CBD beverage?
I have not, but I am ready. I am ready and willing.
I I have. So I went to visit some really close friends in Colorado years back, a couple years back, and I don't know. I don't know if it was 100 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams. I know 1,000 milligrams sounds like a lot, but this was a THC infused like soda that I got at a dispensary, and I'll tell you what, you drink like half of that or three quarters of it or even all of it, you're not going out. You're and you're watching Netflix and you're ordering pizza. I was like done, you know.
Well, maybe because it had 1,000 milligrams of THC in it, Kevin. That's a lot.
You gotta try it, you know, and experience it yourself. But hey, I'll tell you what, it worked. But what I've been doing as of recent, and I've really been liking this, is I have obviously tinctures of CBD, and I even got sent some sugar, raw hemp infused raw sugar packets from Azuka, and
Mm,
I put the CBD and sugar in my coffee, or I'll even do the
mm,
tincture, and I'll tell you what, it's such a great feeling because it's not that jittery caffeine. Like, you know,
mm,
if you're drinking in the morning, it's a really smooth, kind of clear
mm.
feeling. And so I've been doing that quite a bit. I've been enjoying it.
That's cool. That's a nice life hack. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. You know, it's funny, like what you said about like drinking the THC beverage and being knocked out. Like a year and a half ago, we were listening to music and I got a beer at the bar just thinking I'm getting a beer. The bartender did not mention at all that it was like instead of the regular alcohol content, it was like 8%, which is like more than or at least double what a normal beer is. And like I'm not a big drinker anyways, so like one and a half beers usually gets me drunk. But I was like a few sips in, I was like, this is not regular beer. So you can play with it even if it's just alcohol. I mean, like you always have to find the right like measure that works for you. I will tell you, I was out of it for the rest of the night. It was a mess.
Well, if you ever come to Texas, I'll introduce you to the Pedicolis Velvet Hammer. It's a craft beer that literally looks like motor oil. It's so dark, and I think it's 11% alcohol. Yeah,
That
so
would put me on
have two of those, and you're gonna be needing to call it Uber. You know, you're not.
it. I'll have two of those. I'm going to need to be sleeping where I'm standing.
Yeah.
Especially if it looks like motor oil, you know that doesn't taste very good. Or I don't know, maybe it does taste good.
It's an acquired taste. It's an acquired. You learn to like it. It's just like whiskey. You know, whiskey. When the first time you take it, you're not like where it's wine, where you go, you know, it burns and you you blow it out, and then over time you start to like it.
Oh
You know.
gosh. Well, I actually like whiskey, so there you go.
Hey, there you go, whiskey girl. What whiskey do you drink?
It varies, but we usually have like Macallan in our house.
That's good. I
But yeah,
Buffalo Trace I would recommend is very good, and it's pretty reasonably priced, and most
interesting.
most recently I tried Smokin' Gun. It's a Las Vegas whiskey, and that was good.
These are brands I've never heard of. Okay, good. I'm gonna write them down.
There
That's
you go.
good. Always looking for a new whiskey.
Hey, I got you. Don't worry. So, Rena, what else should we talk about before we sign off here? I know it's like late in the evening or getting to be in the evening there in Israel, but what else should we talk about?
Well, we've talked about beverages. We've talked about what stocks we like. What are you excited about in the cannabis sector? What were you excited about in terms of like with all this hoopla and stuff? Where have you been putting your focus?
I'm excited first and foremost for all the momentum that the industry is getting right now. I think that that's excellent, and hopefully we can keep it up, and not just kind of have this die down as other issues pop up,
Yeah.
because there is a lot of economic benefits to legalizing cannabis. So I'd say that's first and foremost. But really, what I'm anxious for, that the industry desperately needs, is FDA consumer oversight for CBD and for hemp derived products, because right now, living in Texas, being in our first grow season, it's just tough, man. A lot of the farmers out here are working really hard and cultivating amazing crops and beautiful flower, and it's hard to sell that right now because they're being undercut by the illicit market, or snake oil and different lower quality products that aren't being regulated, and in some cases don't even include CBD and the other cannabinoids that they're saying that they do. So that is really what I'm hoping for, is that the FDA steps up, and with the Biden administration, if they end up, if they take the office, to really make that a priority, because a lot of people are hurting right now without that.
Yeah, it's been disappointing because there was like it was quiet for so long for a while from the FDA. They like I felt like they were kind of doing a good job with it, and then like in the past year they've like okay, we're working out our regulations, we're going to come out with our thing, we're good. But it doesn't seem like anything is really beneficial to the farmers. It's all like very onerous to like the bad faith actors and not much else. And then I've been seeing like hemp be seized, mistaken that it's thinking that it's cannabis, which is like preposterous to me. Like, why? And then it seems, well, then I get my, I don't like to call them conspiracy theories, but then I got my paranoid hat on, where I think like they won't let us grow. They won't, it's legal, but they still won't let it. I don't know why they're doing that, but it's certainly disappointing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's I think it's part of its lack of education, right, and communication. I mean, the fact that the FDA is hesitant, I think, is because they still see cannabis or being, a Schedule One, but I guess that's THC, right? I mean, when you're growing a plant that has that percentage of 0.3 or below, and it's federally legal due to the 2018 Farm Bill, you'd think that these departmental government agencies would talk to each other a little more.
But there was even like I was just reading about mistaking where the cops mistook cannabis for hemp or mistook hemp for cannabis, and they destroyed it. But they had been told that it was hemp, and they didn't believe that. It's like that is insane to me. And I will say, I just we have an interview coming up with Planet 13 CEO Bob Grossbeck, and they do a lot of lobbying. Planet 13 has that huge dispensary in Vegas, so they're like at the forefront of lobbying. And I was asking him, like, do you think kind of like when the FDA comes out and says these things about CBD or CBD companies, or when they come out and say things about THC cannabis, do you think it has to do, like I was saying, do you think that some ballot initiatives don't get passed because, let's say, sometimes people say like, well, the social equity component of it wasn't tight enough, it wasn't formidable enough, or whatever the reason is, or we haven't gone medical yet, so we're not going to go adult use yet. Whatever reasons are that people say that some things aren't passed or that things take a long time to get passed. And he was like, honestly, I really feel like there's a stigma against everything cannabis related. And some people have overcome that stigma and some people haven't. And in terms of like the more conservative like professions, which I think like politics is, and even medicine, like physicians, I think are really slow to come on board in terms of like, some aren't, but many are, I think, in terms of understanding like the power of THC, the power of CBD, and that it's not just like, oh, something for stoners or something for hippies or something for the wellness community. Um, I think once somebody understands that, they understand it, but I think there is still like a lot to get out from under in terms of the taboos and the stigma and the preconceived notions. And I just think that it is. And I think like, even though we passed the farm bill, even though the states passed the farm bill, I think it still takes some time to like get out from under those outdated modes of thinking.
No, that's a really great point, and I do agree with you. There is a huge gap in understanding, right, of what the difference is between THC and CBD, and even just cannabinoids in general, right? We have a long way to go when it comes to that, and that's why people like you and I and we bring experts on to kind of deliver that information, right, and um, provide that education to the public. But one thing I would say is that I do think that CBD is helping remove
Yeah.
that stigma, in that, like, at its most basic understanding of CBD, it's that it doesn't get you high, right? Most people kind of understand that notion, whether they've had a bad experience with it or not, because, like, say they've taken it and they didn't feel anything because the product was, contained no CBD in it or whatever, that, because that's happening, and it's
Yeah.
attracting a lot of consumers because they're not even, they're saying there's no benefit to it. Why would I buy it again? I didn't feel anything. So we need to address that. But I think to add to your point, it is a problem, lack of understanding. But I think CBD is helping to remove that stigma, because our grandparents are using it. My parents are using it, right? And sure, there's more conservatism when it comes to public officials, just because of where the cannabis plant has been scheduled all these years. But they're human also, right? And so I think a lot of those older conservative people are trying CBD, and they're kind of maybe opening up a little more to it.
I think that's absolutely right. I think like the farm bill and the CBD coming into definitely opens up. I will say I also think it may be, there's a part that may also like detract from helping because of like the bad faith actors, or because somebody, as you said, like took CBD and there was no CBD in it, or like they think they're buying CBD from Amazon but there's no CBD on Amazon, like I think sometimes like somebody will buy it and be like, well, oh, this is all trash, like this is all just like, um, but I think for the most part, if you're saying like it's obviously a much bigger positive than it is a negative, but I do still think that we have like, with each bad news for somebody that doesn't know much about the sector, doesn't have much experience, like that can like really set them back. And then they tell all the people they know that it's a bunch of BS. I mean, there's people that I talk to on my podcast that think CBD is like maybe not BS, but maybe like one step below BS. Like, and these are people in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, my wife, she's not a hater on it, but when I first would buy product before I started the podcast, I'd buy CBD products at just kind of, big chain retail shops and this and that. And she would try it and she'd be like, I don't really know. Like, and I kind of had more of that placebo effect. But now that I've actually been having guests on who represent companies of high standard and high quality, and, you get to meet them and open under the hood to see what their operation looks like and whatnot. I've totally seen a difference in the products, no doubt about it. And she has too. So it's really just making sure that you do your due diligence to find that quality product and make sure that they're doing their testing and their COAs all add up and all that.
And it starts at home, as you so clearly point out. That
Start.
education starts at home. You convinced your wife, man.
I had to. I can't, unless it'd be a sham if I didn't. And so she believes it. My parents use CBD, my grandparents, and I will too. And what's beautiful also is that it like I said before, it touches different demographics. You even see it on the health and wellness side, like athletes, UFC fighters, right? Olympians, like they're taking drops of CBD. So it just does really help everyone.
I think YCBD, that company? Yeah, I think they're doing a great job in terms of like synergizing their celebrity endorsements. I think they're doing a great job of getting the word out there.
I totally agree. Yeah, and that's a great point, because that's talks to what I just said about like the athletes, right? They've done a lot of different sponsorships for those major sports leagues, and it's good because it does alleviate inflammation and other things that you would experience as an athlete, or just regular day life.
Well, that's exactly. I did this webinar when I was in California, about how to start like a cannabis company. And one of the panelists was Dr. Jessica Knox, who I also had on the podcast, who's fantastic. She's trying to train physicians in cannabinoid medicine. Her and her family are like doing great work. And she said this, and I think about it pretty much every day, like that we all lead such inflammatory lives. And guess what CBD is? Anti-inflammatory. And she was like, we should all be taking CBD every single day. Everyone, all like every day.
Yeah.
And I've been touting that as gospel since she said that. And yeah, it's there's a lot of benefit there.
So true. I mean, you hear guys like Joe Rogan. He takes what I think he said like 10,000 or 1,000 milligrams a day. I think 1,000 milligrams a day is what he's taking. But just because of that inflammation factor, I know me. I'm a former athlete, wrestler of many many years, and I have back pain and I have muscle aches and whatnot, and it does help, And there's a lot of consequences that we don't realize come from inflammation, right? Like headaches and like I said, back pain, lower back pain, things like that, where you think it's just your back that hurts, but really your muscles are inflamed. You know what I mean? You need something to alleviate that.
And also, like for animals, like since I've been talking to some of these CBD companies, how powerful it is, especially for dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have an older dog, and like all these things that are happening to her body, like why can't she have some relief from that? And I will say this is something like you asked me, like Israel, and in terms of like how they're influenced and affected by like the US going legal. Like this is a real bone that I have to pick, is like CBD here is insanely expensive. And it's like really it doesn't need to be that way. So
Really?
yeah, it's prohibitively expensive. So I would love to see that changed and modified in some way, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of well, whatever. Now not much attention is being paid to much of anything. But I wish there was more of a there's a lot of talk about cannabis being legalized, but very little about CBD here because it you can get it, but it's just really expensive.
Right, yeah. And another thing that you kind of touched on that I'm excited about in the future is discovering and learning more about our endocannabinoid system,
Yeah,
right? Because that is really going to be the light bulb and the eye opener for people to kind of correlate how cannabis and the different cannabinoids help with our and marry with our endocannabinoid receptors.
that's
That's is something that's so untapped. I mean, I've said this before. I type endocannabinoid system on my computer in Word or whatever. It's not even a recognized word, you know.
I know.
So yeah, that'll be interesting.
I know. Whenever I type that also brings up the paranoid part of my brain. Whenever I type in a word that's not recognized, it's usually something that I'm for and that the government is against. And I'm always like, dude, what? You can't make it not a word just because you're not into it.
Right.
It's, yeah,
It's the future of medicine, like many people have said on this podcast and as elsewhere, is that cannabis is the future of medicine.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, something that I've been talking a lot, like even just in the past like 5 6 months, is that cannabis is medicine, and like trying to get away from even like Dr. Jessica Knox also talks about this, like even getting away from like calling it recreation. Like, yes, to some degree, of course, there's like recreation involved, but like honestly, like everybody that's taking cannabis in some way or another is using it medicinally, like
Right.
in some way or
Right. Yeah. And that's what's so fascinating about it, right? Is that not only like we talked about, it helps with ailments like inflammation and others, but if you want to use the word recreation, fine. But it's like even on the creativity side, right? If you're in the arts, right, smoking THC can help kind of open different thoughts of creativity that you wouldn't have if you didn't do it.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, which is great to see like all these discussions being around even like the psychedelics part of, even though it's not cannabis, it's just like broadening our understanding of what we use to treat ourselves. Like it doesn't always have to be an opioid. Guess what? Like it doesn't have to be something that is like so detrimental to our bodies and our systems. Like it can be something, you know, much more natural, much smoother, much, yeah, it's, I'm so like, it's funny, like when I was just in the States, you know, I was talking to family that I don't really talk to unless I'm there. And just like my older uncles and aunts talking about like CBD and THC, like exactly what you're saying, and like asking me questions about it. And it's just like the topics are there in ways that they didn't used to be. And it's like that part is really exciting. And it feels like wherever we are, even if we're not exactly where we want to be, I think I hope we're on the right path in terms of like getting it done. But at least like the conversation has opened up, which I think is salient.
Absolutely. Yeah, it starts with conversation, understanding, and then ultimately advocacy. Well, Rena, hey, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure catching up with you as always. And let's do this again. Maybe we do it more frequently. I don't know. I know we were shooting for a month, but maybe during this course of the election and truly finding out who is the winner and inauguration, we can catch up and see what the stocks are doing and talk about the industry.
Absolutely. I'm always down to talk to you, Kevin. I always enjoy it and always appreciate coming on. Really, really fun.
Awesome. No, I enjoy it too, and I hope that our listeners enjoyed it as much as we did. So
Yeah, absolutely.
thanks
Absolutely.
thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Bye. Take care, everybody.